Welcome to today's meeting of Democrats of Greater Tucson. It's just fantastic to see you. I think we have 8 more days of Trump in office, and then we can get all back to reality. And hopefully the Capitol will be more heavily fortified during the inauguration, so we don't have to put up with another insurrection from the right wing. In any event, our speaker today is going to be Bonnie Heidler. Bonnie, hi, how are you? Before we get rolling on that, I want to call on Kathy Ramage-White, who's the board member who is in charge of membership for Democrats of Greater Tucson, to say a few words. Go ahead.
Okay, hi everybody. I know I already wished you Happy New Year last week, but in case you weren't here, I hope you're still having a Happy New Year. So happy New Year, right? Different reactions to the horrors that went on earlier in the week. Hopefully that won't happen ever again. But we do have a good bit of democracy going on here every Monday when we get together and we learn about Democrats and Democratic ideas and themes and candidates, etc. So now Bonnie is not yet a member. However, she said, and I'm quoting sort of, she's been one before, so of course she'll be one again. So if there's anyone among us right now who has not yet renewed or ever been a member, please join on up today. It's easy to do when you go to the Democrats of Greater Tucson, the DGT.org. Right when you enter, it tells you how you can be a member, and it's only $20. Such a deal, right? So I sure hope you'll think about it and you'll join us. But I won't spend any more time on this because I think you received my message. So I'll give it back to Larry and he can do the introduction for Bonnie. Thanks, everybody. Be well.
Appreciate your announcements. Our membership is growing week by week. We're going to be a force to be reckoned with. We already are a force to be reckoned with. To illustrate that, we have Bonnie Heidler, the chair of the Pima County Democratic Party, on our meeting today. So Bonnie was just elected chair of the Pima County Democratic Party on December 20th. Prior to that, she had been a precinct, and she still is a precinct committee person in Precinct 126. And she was also the chair of the LD10 Democrats for 2 years. Bonnie has an undergraduate degree in psychology and a master's degree in public administration. So she brings a lot of skills to the position. She had a 25-year career in high tech, working with people and running project management. And she also became a successful business owner. Following her love as a bead artist and bead jewelry designer, she opened up a bead store. And that accounts for all of the wonderful colors that we see behind you. So Bonnie, tell us what your plans are for the Pima County Democratic Party and what you have in mind.
All right. Well, thank you, Larry, and thank you, Sandy, for reaching out, and thank you, DGT, for having me here for your lunchtime. Larry pretty much gave a bit about my background. I'll start with my political journey, which actually started 4 years ago on November 9th, 2016. However, I have been always knew what was going on in politics all of my life and been a lifelong Democrat. But I started to look for a way to get very involved because impeachment was my dream. Maybe it might happen this week. We just don't know. Actually happen and remove him. And so I started looking for different ways and found out about Indivisible and became a member of an Indivisible group, and then was recruited through that to become a PC. And then Larry said I became LD10 chair in 2018. So what are we going to be doing in PCDP? Well, a lot of things in the next coming years. So the first thing I want to talk about is fundraising. We do plan to continue to build on the Catalina dams. We are also going to be having about I'm going to try for 3 fundraisers this year. We're going to resurrect the La Pasita brick fundraiser that we had started last year. And we are going to possibly have Udall dinner in the fall. Like Larry said, we got to see how much vaccine gets out there. But if it's possible, we'd really like to try, because that's always a very good, fun event. And I'm hoping that we can do it again. And then we'll probably have another that will be determined. We are just in process of figuring out what we're going to be doing for this year. In addition, one of the things that I'm already starting, I had mentioned that I wanted to create a Young Democrats Task Force. I think the youth today are where we need to be headed and get them active and involved. This is going to be their world, so we want to make sure that they're involved. So I plan to do that. We're going to build our affirmative action committee, which will be headed by Barathon, who's our second vice chair. We're going to reach out to our diverse communities and start to get people engaged there, especially in areas where we didn't have as much voter turnout or registered. So we want to look at those areas and make sure that we reach out and try and get more registrations and votes out. We also will continue to build on our platform. The Executive Committee recently passed a resolution to stop construction on the border wall. And that is also going up to ADP. So hopefully at the State Committee reorganization meeting that'll be happening on the 23rd, that will be passed there too. And now that we own our building, one of the things that I want to start looking into is what we can start to do with our building. As we all know, the building could use a little bit of sprucing up. In addition, we are not handicap compliant, in particular getting into the building, especially at night. And our bathrooms are not handicap compliant. So that's something I want to look into, because it's part of our platform, and I think that we should be, and it's one of our values, and I think that that's what we should be trying to do to make our building reflect our platform and our values. The other thing that we are doing is that we are starting again our various committees, but one of them is our PC and voter education. We're having our first civics class in January 17th for RTS training, to understand what RTS is, how you can sign up, how you can get trained, because as we know, today is the opening session. And speaking of opening session, one of the other things that I am working on, there's a lot of activity about trying to recall Mark Fincham, as he was very involved last week in the insurrection. I've done a lot of investigation as to what we can do. I plan to call the Pinal County Chair to see what we can do together. A letter has already gone out from the LD11 Democratic Party. And I was told to watch what happens at the House today, so maybe something might happen there, but we do need to do something. I think that all of the electeds that were involved, both at the federal and state level, should have some sort of accountability for what they did. And lastly, our biggest challenge that's going to happen this year is redistricting. I've already put a team together, a committee together. We're starting to build that committee. By the way, ADP has been having redistricting events, seminars, so that we can learn about what redistricting is what's going to happen, the process. Mostly these are about the process right now because they're just getting formed, but that is going to be our biggest challenge. And I look at PCDP's role as being that continuity for all the LDs as they are being reorganized. We will be the continuity. So, and help in that process. So there's a lot going on, a lot of things happening, but I'll open up for questions.
Well, thank you very much, Bonnie. If you have a question, ask it live. You can just go to the bottom of the screen and you'll see there's a little people logo that says participants. And you can raise your blue hand as I'm doing right now. And that's the best way to ask your question live. And let's get started with Christina Early. You have a question. Tell us what's on your mind.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Bonnie, for being here. It's nice to meet you. Just a question. I'm considering becoming a PC. I'm in LD3, and I know before that you had to fill out forms and get it into the county clerk, I guess it was. I'm not quite sure exactly. So is that all still the same, that we still have to do that with it not being an election year?
Yes, to be appointed PC, you do need to fill out an application form, and you should be able to either get it from the LD3 or from headquarters. We can mail you out one, because one other thing I should mention, headquarters is closed right now due to COVID. We're hoping to reopen maybe the middle of February. It just depends what the numbers say. But you can make, we do have somebody there by appointment. So you can make an appointment if you need to get anything at headquarters. But the process is that once you fill it out, Christina, it will need to go to the LD3 chair, who will then sign it and get it over to headquarters, where we will then process it. It ultimately does end up at the county elections board to be on the Board of Supervisors agenda to appoint a PC. So the process probably takes about a month total, depending upon when you get your application in and then when the Board of Supervisors is meeting, and to get it to the Board of Supervisors meeting. But it is the lowest level elected official in the state. So it is an important position.
Wonderful. So just to make sure, I can get the application from the office, or I can get it from the LD3, Ava,
Yes, you can contact Ava, and Ava should be able to tell you what the process is for LD3 to get the form.
Great, thanks. Thanks for being here.
No problem, thank you.
All right, we're still waiting for live questions, but Bonnie, I have a question for you, and that is, you know, the Attorney General of Arizona has indicted 2 Democratic elected officials in LD4, which is part of Pima County. They were indicted for basically collecting ballots for old people, disabled people, or this is according to the indictment. We don't know if it's true, and just dropping them off at the polling places. And this is part of a vendetta that Brnovich has against the Democrats, as well as women voters and Latina voters. I wanted to find out what you think would be appropriate for Pima County to do to come to the defense of these 2 Democratic Latinas who are indicted for ballot collection.
Well, first, thank you for bringing it to my attention. The other thing I want to mention is that the Pima side of it, we do need to build up in LD4 so that we can support these people and support them in particular for something like this, so that it sounds like it's not even legal for what he did. It's an old law that was, I guess, originally not, it was determined it wasn't constitutional, of course. And it's a first step, well, not a first step, it is another step in voter suppression. So it is starting. But I think it needs to get at the state level too. We should get ADP involved because this is very important to ensure that this never happens again. And I might even have a conversation with the county recorder because I know that is something she's very, very interested in. And I don't know what at the county level she would be able to do with this particular case. But I think it's worth a conversation, certainly, so that Pima County can at least do something.
All right, thank you very much. We have a question from Paul Stapleton Smith.
Yes, and thank you, Bonnie, for joining us today. We had very narrow victories, all things considered, when the dust settled. Of course, with Georgia, we had tremendous coordination of groups from across the country. Of course, labor unions and community groups, Me Familia Vote, et cetera, et cetera. Understanding that 2022 is going to be every bit as brutal, if you will, for Democratic wins. What specifically can PCDP start doing now to engage and organize with the greater community groups so that we can have some, measure of confidence that we're going to outmobilize our adversaries for 2022? And if I may, of course, as you and I have discussed, we have city elections on it.
We're going to be laying that groundwork for 2022. And one of the things that I would really like to do, and it's really funny you brought that up, Paul, because actually this morning I was thinking about how I can put a round table together of all the leaders of the various groups who are all marching in the same direction, but we should march together and know what each of us are doing in that direction. My real goal for 2022 is to finally make it happen, complete the process of turning AZ blue. And what that requires is to be able to elect a Democratic governor, which we need to do. We also will have some work at the federal level because we will have to reelect Mark Kelly because Mark Kelly was taking over a term and people don't understand that, again, he has to run 2 years later in order to finish that. So, so he will be running again in 2022. So we have to retain that seat and keep it, as well as, of course, all of our congressional candidates that will be running. And in the last part of that is that we have to make sure down ballot, we have an opportunity to turn the state legislature. It is so close that we really have to. And what I was talking about earlier is looking at using data, because I'm going to create a data team also, looking at data to see where we had low turnout, where we have low registration, where it might be a diverse community, how to get people energized in those communities with working with our partners to try to do that. And really this time, turn AZ blue. And we can do it. We can do it if we all put the oars in the water and row the same way. So we can do it.
John Yocum, you have a question? Go ahead and ask.
Yes, thank you. I do have a question. Bonnie, you mentioned a couple of times areas of low registration and low turnout. And I was just wondering if you were willing to say now where those areas are and how we could best address those areas.
Well, that's what we don't know completely yet. A lot of the data from the last election has not been put into VAN yet, so we can do that analysis. I know, for example, in LD10 along our southern edge, we have low turnout. We have low representation in terms of PCs or volunteers. So we want to be able to work to build those areas up. And I know each LD has similar LD9 on their west side. So each of the LDs has a similar area where they need to concentrate and try to build up.
And what would you want to do to build up?
Well, what we need to do is get people energized within those areas, so that they can then help build those areas. So that's one of the things we would want to try to do, is engage within the area and then have them build more within those areas.
All right, thanks very much. We have a question from Jacqueline Romer. Jackie.
Yeah, hi, thank you. I heard about that case with the two Democrats that were accused of moving votes. So my question is, what do Democrats have that's quick, an immediate response, not long-term plans, but something that combats the information war? Is it just the newspaper that we need to rely on, or is it local radio? Is there something that immediately comes out and explains what this is?
I think what you're talking about is the message that this really is just a kind of a frivolous lawsuit, if you will. Right. It seems to feel like it's a frivolous lawsuit, if you will. And why it wasn't kicked out, or why it went forward, I have no idea. Because from what I read briefly, it sounds like that he's using some law that, as I said, that was declared unconstitutional. And Larry, you have more information because I know you were working on kind of a defense fund, if you will.
Yeah, my question really is, though, that when I read it, I'm using myself as an example. When I read it, I thought, oh my God, those poor people, what they must be going through, the fear, the intimidation. And as a reader, this was before I got involved in wanting to do things that I don't even understand yet, to get the message out very quickly what this is. I mean, yeah, it'll be dismissed maybe, but the damage has already been done. I've heard about it. I got afraid. It's almost like, is there a public announcement thing that happens, or a newspaper article, or something immediate, you know?
Go ahead, Larry.
I was just going to say, I mean, now is the time to write letters to the editor, and now's the time to bring this up at Democratic meetings that you go to. There's two ways for indictment of Democrats to be removed, and one is to put pressure on Attorney General Brnovich. You know, he's an elected official. You know, we can call on other Democrats to condemn it and ask for the indictment to be voluntarily dismissed. Other than that, I do know that there is an effort to get a legal defense fund going. But I think right now what we need to do is basically heighten people's awareness. I'm repeatedly surprised when I talk to Democrats about this, that they're not aware of it. So write letters to the editor, write articles, call your legislator and ask them to pick up the ball on this.
And certainly from a PCDP perspective, now that I'm aware of it, we too can send some things out, get it out over social media, to build the awareness of what is going on.
All right, Steve Linder has a question. Go ahead, Steve.
We have an upcoming state committee meeting coming up for voting PCs. Can you give us some background into what we're going to be discussing, what we're voting on, and also because Felicia is not running, something about are running. I mean, do you have any background into what's going to be happening at our state committee meeting coming up shortly?
I'll give you all the information I have, Steve. Unfortunately, it's not a lot because a lot hasn't come out yet. But what the meeting is about, it is the reorganization meeting at the ADP level. There so far are two people who have put their hats in the ring to become chair of ADP. One is Raquel Turan and the other is Sarah Tyree. I just have spoken with Raquel, and I believe she also was the Progressive Caucus, had a forum for both of them to speak, and I think it's been recorded. So if you guys are interested, you can find out a little bit more, those who are state committee reps. And we will be voting on the rest of the officers. And I do not know what resolutions are going to be put forth except for one, which is about the border wall. That's the only resolution I know that is up to be put forth.
How about Josh Polachek? Why don't you go ahead and ask your question, please?
Can you talk to us a little bit about what we're hoping to see in 2022, specifically with the open seat races that are going to be coming up, and how PCDP is going to be helping win those open seat races?
From the open seat races, this year we are going to start to look for and hopefully vet some candidates that we can run for open seats. Again, our goal is going to be to really flip the state legislature and try to get as many good candidates in there as possible, as well as to try to help some of the other, like up in Maricopa County, if we can help get those Democrats elected too, to be able to flip the state.
We have another question from Bill Rowe. Bill, go ahead and ask your question.
Well, this November, we actually gained one seat in the legislature when the state Senate, and the only other state that was close was the state of Georgia. No other state besides Georgia and Arizona had gains. So that's one of those things we need to sort of trumpet a little bit and be pleased with, even though we would like to do much, much better. In planning ahead for the future, we really need to be thinking about, the legislative seats where we can make a difference. And then the Corporation Commission, that's far more important than most people know. And we really need to focus on that. And this next election, as everybody's seeing, is important. But do not forget the Corporation Commission, learn more about it, and then don't forget about the, obviously we're all going to be working on the legislature this next time.
What I did mention earlier, I mentioned about PC and voter education. One of the things that we want to do from a PCDP level, especially about the Corporate Commission, is explain to voters how important it is and what it means, and why it's important to vote down ballot to those kinds of areas where candidates are running. So that's one thing that PCDP will be doing this year, is heavy education, especially in those down ballot races.
Phil Lopes, did you have a question you wanted to ask?
I did, thank you. I wanted to pick up on the discussion about the legislature, and everybody realizes how important that is. Bonnie, it seems to me that in Pima County, we've gone about as far as we can go in terms of electing more legislators. But there are other parts of the state that are much more possible. And instead of viewing those legislative seats as the responsibility of the county party, which I certainly understand, but instead of doing that, taking those resources from the counties such as ours that have little possibility of electing a legislator, and use those resources to help those counties or those races in a coordinated kind of way to try to pick off a seat or two that are more easily done than the ones in Pima County. Is there any possibility of that?
Well, I don't know if you heard me mention that earlier, but I did say that exact thing when I was talking about turning the state blue. You're right. Here, there's probably not much more we can do. There's a little bit, I think, in LD11 that we might be able to help with up there. But I was saying with our partners, maybe in Maricopa County, there may be some areas there where we can help, or other rural areas. So yes, I'm very open to that, because I think that that's, something that we can help out with, and should be, because as you say here, we may not be able to do as much as we could, but we can help others.
I'm very glad to hear that. Thank you, Bonnie, because I
Larry,
know
just so
there'll
I
be a
can
lot of,
interject, there is one place where we can do something, and that's Legislative District 4, which is partly in Pima County and mostly further west in Yuma County, et cetera. But we lost a House seat there for Jerry Payton, and it was picked up by a Republican male in this race, and we should be able to take that seat back. It was a very racist campaign against Jerry.
Yes, and that's another thing that I did mention, that LD4 and LD14 are two areas where I want to build up more, that we also could help. And as I did say, LD11 is another area where I think we came close. So maybe we can push it over the line.
Sandy Binion is our program director. Sandy, please unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question.
Because LD11 and LD4 will not exist the way they are configured right now for the 2022 election, and we really have, I don't know, what kind of ideas we have in terms of who's going to be put together with who. I'm really concerned about when you talk about a particular seat, that seat may not exist as an empty seat or with that particular person. There may be somebody from another LD who got pushed in there that is now the incumbent in that seat. So I guess what I'm asking is, how soon does anybody know we're going to be able to learn anything about redistricting, and is there anything we can really do?
That's an excellent question. And unfortunately, we don't know. I don't have the answer to that. However, if we worked at the precinct level to at least build up and make sure we have PCs and volunteers ready, the precinct won't change itself. Where it may be located might change what LD it might be in. So I think that's one area that we for sure can start and work on and continue to build. No matter where those precincts might end up, they'll at least have people who are ready to start working and get out the vote.
All right, we have a question from Shirley Mooney. Go ahead and you're unmuted. Ask your question.
Hi. I wanted to go back to the issue of ballot harvesting that was touched on. This is something that's touched by a lot of nonpartisan organizations that also try to get ballots to the polling places on election day. It's not done so much before election day, it's on election day. This case was taken to the Supreme Court even as to whether or not it's legal. I'd like to know if the Democratic Party is offering any kind of legal assistance to those PCs that were charged. It's definitely suppression, and the case has been appealed to the Supreme Court. I guess that the argument being that there's no proof that the people who deliver these ballots receive them unsealed, or whether they were sealed when they received them. So I don't know what the issue is, but is the Democratic Party providing any kind of legal assistance?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I certainly can find out and let you know. Larry, have you heard if I haven't heard or seen anything that ADP is.
Yes, there are two attorneys in Phoenix who are, one is working to get representation for these Democrats, and the other one is working to create a legal defense fund. However, the fund hasn't been created. And what you mentioned, Shirley, is that yes, the Ninth Circuit said that this ballot harvesting felony was unconstitutional because it clearly discriminates against Latino voters. It's going to be argued by the before the U.S. Supreme Court on March 3rd. We're waiting to see what they're going to do.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I didn't know it was being taken to the U.S. Supreme Court. So good.
Yes, by all means. Okay, Harvey Akeson, you have a question.
You're circling around talking about communications, getting people to know that we're here, and getting active. We have so much on this board right now of people who worked elections for so many years, and it's right down your alley, Larry, is we ought to have a meeting of the, Sandy ought to arrange some kind of a meeting for just communications, telling people how to communicate, getting the club secretaries or presidents to put out news releases, writing letters, all of the things that are necessary to get the communication going, because we want the people to know that we're here, and we should have a meeting on it. Thanks, Larry.
All right. Lynn Hudson.
Thanks, Larry. I want to go quickly back to the ballot harvesting issue. I think there's ambiguity here about what the rules really are. And since we are a party that focuses on facts, I think we all need to know what the facts are, because maybe what needs to happen is we need to change some legislation about this issue. As a poll worker, I was told that the only people who could drop off ballots were family members, people who lived in the same residence, caretakers, and maybe one other thing that I'm not thinking of at the moment. But I think it might be a good idea to have the person who wrote something about the ballot harvesting issue on our website talk about what the facts really are, so everybody knows what the facts are, and then what the possible solutions are. Defending people is one thing, but if they've done something that's illegal, then what we need to do is make legal what needs to be done so people can have their voices and their ballot heard and their ballots counted.
I agree. We need to get the correct information out and elevate the issue so that people understand what really is going on, and does it require a legislative change?
Right.
Lillian Fox has a question. Lillian, go right ahead and ask your question.
I was going to say, I'm so glad you were elected to head the Democratic Party in Pima County. I think you demonstrated that you're highly qualified and somebody who's going to make some moves. Are we doing anything to support the recall of Fincham? Because he's like tied for the worst legislator in the state.
Yes, I did mention earlier that I spent a lot of time last week trying to figure out what we can do. I am going to be contacting the Pinal County chair, see what we can do there. And I did mention that LD11 Democratic Party sent a letter to legislature to basically not seat him, to censure him. So there is stuff that is going on. And so I am going to continue trying to do as much as we can, especially if there can be a recall. I've heard two different things. I talked to Randy Fries, and he said he thought that he has to be seated for 6 months and then we could do the recall, but I'm not sure that that's true. Plus, the other thing that we can do, because I did also talk to Kirsten Engel, we can send a letter to the ethics committee recommending that he be removed.
He was actually in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday, and it's not clear that he was in the Capitol building, but he was there and doing all the things he does.
And he was texting encouragement, if you will, to the insurgents.
Bill Rowe, go ahead. You have a question for Bonnie.
The last redistricting was a decade ago. They are incredibly important because it determines our legislative districts and our congressional districts for the next decade. And this is really, really important. It also filters down to boards of supervisor districts and all sorts of lower things, but the constitutional amendment does not cover those. Anybody who's not read it, not familiar with it, you really should look up the Arizona Constitution, that amendment. And we are one of the very relatively few states that have an independent redistricting commission. The Republicans started the process early. And so the two Republican commissioners are already named. The two Democratic commissioners are already named. And there is a pool of 5 people who will be vying to be the independent chair. Now, if it follows what happened 10 years ago, the first week or second week of March, the Secretary of State, who now is Katie Hobbs, the last time it was the Republican Ken Bennett, they will call together a meeting in the state capitol, and there will be several decisions made that day or shortly thereafter. One will be picking the independent chair. That's the main thing. And that will be phenomenally important to be aware of who those possible candidates are. And if you know anything about them, send information up to Franny Sharp, who is sort of coordinating this effort statewide. But then the other decisions that will be made that day or very shortly thereafter, there'll be first the independent chair, and then they're going to have to choose the consultant who will work with helping them draw the redistricting lines. And then there's going to be a lawyer for the commission has to be chosen. And there's at least one other spot. And those decisions are all extremely tense. But the important thing is last time we had some 60 plus meetings that the commission ran statewide to take input. And one of the things that every single person in Pima County needs to be aware of is those meetings are incredibly important. And we learned to our pain that there was a very early meeting of the commission on the east side of Tucson, and we did not prep for it. And the Tea Party people turned out in force. The other meeting that we lost out on was up in Payson, where the Tea Party just totally dominated it. And we simply have got to have people at every single one of those redistricting meetings to testify about the importance of district lines.
Bill, thanks very much. We have several people who have questions for Bonnie. I want to make sure we get to everybody. Let's start with Josh Polachek. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, so mine was just a quick comment that with regard to Fincham and the others, there was a discussion at the federal House level around the 14th Amendment, Section 3, which prohibits people holding federal office who've engaged in insurrection, as well as those who gave aid to that. And so it's unclear how that would be carried out at the state level, but that there is a potential, even potentially constituents in LD11 who might file suit that he's ineligible, or could be something that the Secretary of State could do. So just wanted to bring people's attention that there are multiple avenues besides just a recall.
All right, Bonnie, anything to add to that?
No, because
all right.
We've talked a lot about it.
Let's go to Andrea Kennedy. Andrea, please unmute yourself. And if you have a question, go ahead and ask that for Bonnie.
Thank you, Larry. Hi, Bonnie. You partially answered my question, but it involves voter engagement, and I guess my fear. And I would also know, going on what Bill Rowe said, it would also be interesting to know what we did right in this election, going on off of his comments. But I guess my fear in relation to voter engagement and getting people to the polls and getting them to vote down ballot is that the existential wave of fear that swept the country because of the outgoing president's actions will diminish once he's gone. And when I say this, I hasten to add, I do not in any way mean to diminish the efforts of the volunteers and the donors and the activists, because they were sterling. So I guess what I want to know is, how do we keep the voters' interest as things calm down? And I think they will calm down, and make people and get people's attention on, well, we know redistricting is important. How do we let everybody else know that it's important? Thank you.
Good seeing you, Andrea. So yes, you're right. Right now is when we need to start, well, need to keep people involved. We had a huge amount of involvement in 2020. So one thing that went right, a lot of people came out, a lot of people got involved, a lot of people did vote and registered. We had increase in both registration and voter turnout. So that was really good. Let me use District 1 as an example, Rex Scott's election. PCDP helped out by doing geofencing and getting messages out there to people. And we really believe that impacted that particular election to go Rex's way. And I want to do more of that. I wanted to do that when I was chair of LD10 to try to do some geofencing in particular areas where we know we need to get messages out, where we need to build up as I was saying, build up volunteers, build up PCs in those areas, but get the voters registered and out there. So with things like geofencing in social media, we may be able to do quite a bit of that. That was something that went really right that we should build upon. I hope I answered it, but those are some of the things that went really well.
All right, we have a question from Lillian Fox. Lillian, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yep. I apologize for having been late to the meeting, but have we talked about Steve Christie? Because he voted against certifying the election results in Pima County. And, you know, I think people who pull stuff like that, where there was he didn't even give any reason why the Pima County election results shouldn't be certified, but that was appalling that he did that. So is there any effort to censor him or do something about his behavior?
From a PCD point of view, at this point, we haven't done anything, but definitely we'll look into that because yes, you're right. There should be some accountability for his actions.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else have another question? Please raise your,
Carolyn's been having a question for a while.
All right, go ahead, Carolyn.
It's been going like
It's not really a question. I just wanted to remind everyone that wards 3, 5, and 6 on the Tucson City Council will be up this year. The primary is August 3rd, and we should all keep our ears out for anybody Republican running against the incumbents.
All right, thank you, Carolyn. Well, Bonnie, we have about 2 minutes left. I wonder if you could wrap up everything that's been covered today, some points you think are important to make, and how we can all support you.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you again for having.
Sandy had a question.
Sandy.
Okay, Sandy, go ahead and ask your question.
It wasn't more of a question. Well, it was a comment that they can start making the candidates can start making themselves known in March, according to the website, the city website. And I will be watching that. And as soon as people start registering, letting they're saying that they're going to be running, I'll let somebody know. I don't know yet whether any of the incumbents are going to have opposition or not yet, but we will be hearing from all of them. And then I want to thank Bonnie for this presentation, and also remind everybody that next week our speaker is going to be Jeremy Lasher, who was working in the Georgia campaign, and he's going to be speaking about that campaign and perhaps some other campaigns, since he's worked in campaigns all over the country for a while, for a couple of years anyway. He was working for the DCC. So that should be interesting, and make sure to check that, because I've got some interesting people coming up for the future, which I will be sharing with the board in a little while. So thank you.
Go ahead, Bonnie. Why don't you take us out of the meeting and give us some concluding remarks.
Well, as I said, I want to thank you all again for having me. We have our work cut out for us this year. and next year. And as we pointed out, there will be a test at the end of this year called our city election. So we will be starting to, help and support the LDs as they're getting people out to vote for that, as well as building up the ranks so that we're ready for 2022. And we hope you guys will all be there to help and get out there and get out the vote.